River Valley, which is ancestral home to Acre, Mel, I'm gonna have to work on this, and Peepash Indian communities whose care and keeping of this land allow us to be here today. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I will now and I will call now the April meeting of the Sustainable and Livable Communities Committee to order. As you might expect, our committee covers topics related to sustainable and livable communities. Note, there are no formal votes or decisions about city programs, policies, or budgets that will happen here. Our role is to explore various topics with staff and stakeholders and community members, and to make recommendations to our council colleagues. We want this process to be transparent, inclusive, and easy for you to be part of whenever you choose to be. And you can share your thoughts with us by filling out a comment card about any item on the meeting agenda, or by reaching out to us directly with any other thoughts, questions, or ideas. Someday, when we host meetings in person again, it will be easier for people to speak in meetings. For now, in the virtual environment, we need you to fill out a comment card in advance that can be read into the record for any agendized item. Okay, the link to the comment cards can be found on our committee webpage at tempe.gov/SLC. And you'll find contact information for committee members and staff there for non-agendized questions as well. Councilmember Cubie.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair Adams, chair for a day, and co-chair of my heart. The next agenda is item 2, so it's review and approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was in February, by the way. If there's no objections, I move that we approve the meeting minutes from February 23rd, 2022, as written.
I have no objections and second that motion. So the February minutes are unanimously approved.
Very good.
The next item on our agenda is item 3, public comments. This committee welcomes public comments. According to the Arizona Open Meeting Law, the committee may only discuss matters listed on the agenda. Matters brought up by the public under public comment that are not listed on the agenda cannot be discussed by the committee. A 3-minute limit per person will be in effect. Kristen, do we have any comment cards for this meeting?
Councilmember Adams, Councilmember Cubie, yes, we do. We have 2 today. The first is from David Sokolowski regarding agenda item 4A3, Solar Ready Code Update. And he has asked that we read his comments aloud for the record. And David says, I think the city should exclude multifamily development from future regulations until we can find a way to get our rental prices under control. If the city mandates solar ready, car chargers, and green infrastructure, then developers will be forced to build luxury apartments for people who can actually afford to pay for those improvements. The second card comes from Bastian and Druet. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he would like to speak for himself. So Bastian, I have elevated you. You should be able to unmute yourself and make your 3-minute comment.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, council members Cubie and Adams. My name is Bastian Andrew, and I'm here to speak before you this afternoon on behalf of the Arizona Multi-Housing Association. As you are aware, the AMA represents owners, operators, and developers of over 348,000 rental housing units across the state of Arizona, many of which located here in Tempe. As it currently stands today, the AMA is opposed to the city's exploration of a proposed solar-ready code for a multitude of reasons, as we expressed during a stakeholder meeting on February 10th this year. Rather than focus on piecemeal approaches to regulating and prescribing development, the AMA would respectfully suggest that the city approach the development community to identify areas in which the city may partner with developers to incentivize sustainable or green construction and management practices, many of which are already in use. In the case of multifamily development, where there is a market need or desire, the development and management community is quick to adapt and respond. When consumers desire walkability and multimodal forms of transportation, we see multifamily with fewer parking spaces located closer to transit stops. When management companies desire more energy efficient buildings, we see the widespread use of high albedo paint, energy efficient insulation, and dual pane windows in new construction. When residents demand green amenities, housing providers install chargers and provide recycling bins to meet that demand. In short, the multifamily industry is highly responsive to the needs and desires of its consumers and is highly incentivized to respond to market need as to consistently provide housing providers with a competitive edge and make communities more attractive or amenity-rich to attract residents. What provides a disservice to residents and housing providers alike, however, are expensive mandates which serve little purpose other than to significantly increase the cost of housing. As this council is astutely aware, housing affordability remains at the forefront of many Tempean household concerns, with both local and statewide efforts increasing over the past year to address the affordability crisis which has been exacerbated over the past few years. When development costs are high, the cost recuperation is passed along to the renter, ultimately undercutting and undermining the express purpose of developing more housing, affordability. Such a consequence would run afoul of Tempe's affordable housing strategy and Hometown for All initiative, which both seek to alleviate the upward pressures on housing costs being experienced by the city's renters. It is imperative that now more than ever, Tempe consider the consequences of increasing development costs and instead choose to lead on the issue of affordable development and partnerships with the development community. And so it is to this end we recommend that rather than pursue a solar code mandate modeled after Appendix CA of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, the city take a more tailored approach to exploring and identifying incentives appropriate to Tempe development as to partner with the development community in effectuating more housing supply in a manner which ensures future developments remain attainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next item.
Chair,
I'm
Chair Adams, could I ask a question of the representative?
Sure, go ahead.
So is he still on?
Yes, council member, I'm still available.
So it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad to hear about your interests, your keen interest in affordable housing. I know right shortly before I got on council, I think this was in 2014, the Multifamily Housing Association was the chief proponent and lobbyist for a repeal or basically preemption of inclusionary zoning. And inclusionary zoning is a tool used all across the country, a tool that cities can use to require developers, multifamily developers, to set aside a certain percentage for affordable and workforce housing. And it's a big tool. It's a very important tool. And even in place, we often hear from developers like this doesn't pencil out, we can't afford to do this. But in areas and cities where they have inclusionary zoning, somehow affordable housing, workforce housing tends to be more in the mix in multifamily projects. So if you guys are so interested in affordable housing, I hear you keenly expressing that you want to see more affordable housing, workforce housing brought up, that I'm hoping that you'll call for repeal of the inclusionary zoning preemption in the state legislature. So I'd just like to hear your response to that.
So Councilmember QB, respectfully, we simply believe that this is a question of supply and demand. If you were to overnight create double the amount of apartment units or just housing units in general across the entire city of Tempe and make them available for renters and homeowners, it would immediately drop down the price of all housing across the city, rather than targeting certain segments of the population and then implementing price controls, which have been proven not to work in multiple markets, including from a study that was conducted by UC Berkeley back in, I believe, 2014, 2019. At the end of the day, what we need to do is just build more housing. We've done an absolutely wonderful job at attracting more jobs and more employers to the state of Arizona, but one thing we have not done is commensurately increase the supply of housing to actually house all those individuals. So while things such as price controls may seem like quick wins, ultimately they still aren't going to address the root causes of these price increases, which is going to be the supply of housing.
Thank you, and I thank you for answering the question. There's a lot of peer-reviewed literature that shows that that doesn't necessarily trickle down, and when if that trickle down does happen, it takes place over decades and doesn't immediately resolve. Like you hit more out there, and then all the prices drop. It just isn't held up in the literature. But I understand your point of view. I'm just trying to point out that you're acting as advocates today for affordable housing, but the biggest tool that cities have is taken away from us by the legislation that you guys put forward. So just needed to get that point across, but I'm ready to go on. I'm ready to go on, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 4A, current items and updates. And we'll begin with item 4A1, integrative pest management update with Craig Heaton. Craig, are you ready?
I am. Good afternoon, Council Members Adams and QB. I appreciate the opportunity to present an update on integrated pest management. This is a follow-up from a February presentation. And hopefully my screen is coming through now. Today, I would like, as I have in the past, just provide a brief overview just to provide some context on integrated pest management. But then I would like to speak on two specific items. One is the organic land management grant. I was able to speak to Sean Nicholson with the city of Tucson, who is leading that effort, a very concurrent effort to what we have. And then I would just like to provide a brief update on maybe where we could go from here with integrated pest management as part of a larger performance measure that would be more consolidated than the current one that we tend to house integrated pest management under. So just as a first look on integrated pest management, as a reminder, it just means that as we reactively have to address pests at various different levels, whether they're weeds or insects, we try to take an approach that is different each and every time depending on what the pest issue is, but we realize that prevention is going to be our best key. So we want to focus on those cultural practices, which is why the Organic Land Management Grant has really been such a key thing for us to try to implement. So not only from a land management perspective do we want to make sure that we're providing proper irrigation, fertilization, and aerification and reseeding, but we want to do so, and we've been able to implement some initial recommendations through some Stony Fields grant funds and Safeway at Dwight Park and over the Tempe Sports Complex, utilizing organic products to do so. So just a quick update on Dwight Park. In February, I provided an update that after implementing some of the written recommendations by the Beyond Pesticides and Osborne Organics team in calendar year 2021, we really wanted to take a proactive approach in addressing burr clover, which was one of the weeds on the bottom left of this slide here, that when those weeds and those seeds dry, they can get stuck on feet of pets and then also some fur of pets, especially in the turf areas. So the goal really was to implement some proactive measures during the growing season last year. We found that we saw some increase in turf coverage and health, but we knew that this off season, kind of the dormant period, as we can see in that top right picture, we wanted to also be as proactive as possible. So we were able to work with Beyond Pesticides and Osborne Organics to identify an organic herbicide that we made 3 different applications between December and January. In February, things look very promising. We have found that it has not been as promising as what we had anticipated. In April, we have seen a recurrence of the burr clover that has come back. It is consistent with some of the efforts that we're finding in some other areas of our parks with some of the organic herbicides. But we would like to then continue to work with organic products and continue to loop back with our project team for some solutions as we enter the growing season, and then look at some other alternatives as we head into the dormant season that typically starts in about November, December. So we may have not found the best recipe for the off season, the dormant, in addressing the burr clover, but we do believe that there's some options, which really transitions well into an update from the city of Tucson. They have taken a very similar approach in the way that they're addressing and implementing the grant funds, where they're also looking at a sports field, a high quality, high use sports field, but also a general park area. So they're using a football field and then a general park very similar to Dwight Park. For us, they similarly have had a great and positive experience with the team from Osborne Organics and Beyond Pesticides. Puncture vine is their biggest issue that they're having within turf areas. So it is not exactly like burr clover that I showed in the previous slide, the issue that we have at Dwight Park, but it is very similar that it does have some burrs on it that are very limited compared to burr clover, but are equally problematic within the turf areas. So that is their biggest issue. Their initial first year approach has been partnering with the neighborhood on some mechanical removals. They have a neighbor who has been a great partner with them to remove that weed. It is a bit more spreading, kind of spread out than what burr clover is. So they've had a little bit of success that way. But they also went with a more transitional approach through Osborne Organics and Beyond Pesticides to look at utilizing an inorganic pre-emergent herbicide this past off season to try to help and reduce germination, so that they could be more proactive from that sense rather than reactive in removing items. So we may take that as an option for us to then loop back in with Osborne Organics and Beyond Pesticides this year, just to see what we would do at Dwight Park specifically with the burr clover issue. But it was a very fruitful conversation. It was a great chance for us to connect and talk not just about the organic land management implementation, but also about other areas that we certainly do cross over beyond just integrated pest management. So it was a fruitful conversation. I appreciate that recommendation for us to check in with them and then to be able to report back. But we look forward to continuing to connect with them in the coming months and years moving forward. And then also would like to just make provide an update of integrated pest management is something that our team in connecting with the Office of Strategic Management would like to recommend is there is no specifically no integrated pest management performance measure. As seen at the bottom of this slide, what we have identified as integrated pest management falls under the very broad performance measure of 3.16, which is really as a physical space that we manage within a larger community service and parks and recreation system. What does quality look like? And we believe that addressing pests is a key part to that, but it is not, it certainly is just one part of a much broader focus. So we've started initial conversations with the Office of Strategic Management and Diversity to look back at what are some of the outcomes that we think are going to be helpful, but then really trying to be as holistic and system oriented as we can, whether we look at plant health care or system, environmental system care. But we believe that there is an opportunity here, very similar to what we're doing with organic land management, that really would help us identify opportunities for us to provide and really look at a health and wellness plan for the living infrastructure that we manage. So we believe that integrated pest management would be a key piece to that, but we believe it is a bit more specific than the current 3.16 performance measure, but could be equally comprehensive in the sense that there would be multiple strategies that would fall under that. So that's really where we would see the future of integrated pest management as staff. So I'll be happy to take any questions and go back from here, but I'll stop sharing, but I appreciate the opportunity to present a quick update on integrated pest management.
Thank you so much, Craig. Good to see you, at least virtually. So good job. I don't have any questions. Councilmember Cubie, do you?
Well, thank you, Craig. I know we have a lot to learn from our sister city, from Tucson, and I think they have a lot to learn from us as well. And so I'm glad you have that. I know you have an open line of communication anyway, but I'm glad you reached out with this, and it's interesting to see the similar yet distinct findings related to different kinds of weeds. And so thank you for doing that. And yes, I mean, the 3.16 performance measure is so broad. We're finding that kind of issue too with our transportation performance measures, where if you want to look at shade for transit stops is under satisfaction with the transportation system. And so it's hard to keep on track when there's really specific goals that we want to pursue as a city. And, you know, I'm leaving the council, I'm a lame duck now, quack, quack, but just hoping they'll continue with this movement towards integrative. Well, we are at integrated pest management, but continue really to, I mean, I'll be bold, and you know how I feel about this. I want to ban glyphosate in the city. I think that looking at the World Health Organization's recommendations, and that it's a known carcinogen for pets and likely for humans, that we really need to evolve and move beyond, and many cities are doing that. And I know there are weed challenges, but to me, I choose a weed before I choose applying glyphosate to park grounds that kids and dogs frequent. And it may be, you know, I don't know what the Councilmember Adams believes, but that is my belief. And we don't have to go back to council about the performance measure about seeking out, right? Because we could inform them, I guess, in the next meeting, just that it's happening, but we don't have to go back to council for that approval to do that. Do you think?
I think at this point, and I don't know the process down the road, but it would seem that if there's the inclusion of a new performance measure, it probably does loop back to council at some point, but
sure, the
initial conversations have been fruitful, and we look forward to a kind of a broader conversation with the Office of Sustainability and Resilience and our urban forester.
And Councilmember Adams and I, and just the updates, we can kind of mention that. Councilmember Adams, it might be just good for them to hear it's coming. And but I think you make a really good point that once we have a performance measure, then it can attract budgetary support, where it's not in a performance measure. It's hard to, you know, with our process and the way the structure that we have of giving input on priorities, it's hard to get that as a priority expressed into the budget. So I really appreciate that you've taken that leadership in doing that. And lastly, I just want to thank Stonyfield Farms for funding this study, and also for Safeway for matching. I think they give a matching contribution or close to it. I really appreciate those two supporters, Stonyfield Farms yogurt. So I appreciate that this has been an involvement with, even with the university and with the city, and Stonyfield Farms businesses and, Tucson. I think we've shown some real progress, and I thank you so much, Craig.
Yes,
you,
and
Appreciate
I will be committed. I will stay committed to getting us off the pesticides and all of these things that we use that are cancer causing. So Councilmember QB I'll carry that water for you forward. And I do think a performance measure would be really, really helpful at this point, so we can get the funding where we need it. Because if we don't have the funding, then we're gonna kind of limp along. But if we get the funding, then we can maybe even need to use more expensive products, but we'll be able to afford it if it changes this. Also, Craig, you had mentioned about the volunteers, or what was one of the things you mentioned about volunteers at the park with weeds. Have you explored that anymore, or can you discuss that a little bit for me?
We did. Thank you, Councilmember Adams. We had a Keep Tempe Beautiful was out last spring and provided a manual kind of weed pulling event over at Dwight Park specifically because of the bird clover, working with some of the community over there. So it ends up being a pretty laborious task in the midst of turf, but it is, all things do help. So the question is how would that look moving forward, and really what's the best option for us to pursue, talking with Osborne Organics. And Tucson has really partnered those two efforts between mechanical and some chemical approaches, and I think we can learn from that as well.
Well, and I know like the diversion program, things like that at the city of Tempe, they require that people on diversion do community services, and perhaps that would be a good avenue for sending them over to help with that. So I guess that would be under Naomi's watch, I believe so still. So that would be something that I would suggest, because a lot of times it's like 200 hours of community services they have to do. And this would be a great project, and they get to know others and have a positive experience. So it's kind of a win-win on a lot of different levels. So that's just a suggestion.
Councilmember Adams?
Yes, go ahead.
And I know you're going to carry the water, carry the garden hoe, but I'm wondering, and Craig, this is a casual conversation. There's a new council coming in, and it would be good to inform them about progress made in integrative pest management. And I know there's a very heavy calendar for a work study session in the next few months, but can that be planned for some time so the entire council and the new council can get a briefing on this?
Great question, Councilmember QB. I wonder if that would be potentially timed with the formation of that performance measure, and we could report back on a few different things, including
Great idea.
Land management.
Great idea. So I know it only takes 2 council members to request an agenda item, but I mean, you can always bring one too. So we could do it formally if you need us to, but other than that, yeah, you'd be bringing it forward anyway. So that would be great. Thanks. Sometime
in the fall. Thank you very much, Councilmember.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, we're going to move on now to item 4A2, dog parks update. Craig, before you leave us, I think this one's yours also.
It is. Thank you, Councilmember.
Uh-huh.
All right. So a quick update on dog parks. I appreciate the opportunity to provide 2 updates here today. This one does fall under performance measure 3.16, which we know that quality of life within Tempe, the Parks and Recreation system, is for the community as a whole, including our pets and people, and especially those interaction within parks. And we know that a lot of our satisfaction ratings are tied to how we can have that full family feel within a park, including pets. So we currently, I'm going to provide an overview on additional dog parks where we sit. At one of the previous updates, we're really looking at the equity study. We have since found an opportunity within one of our regional parks for an opportunity that we're entering into that I'll provide an update. And then I'd just like to provide a quick announcement on some upcoming seasonal turf requires, because we are coming out of dormancy into the summertime when we do have an opportunity to make some improvements within some of our dog parks. So first, from additional dog parks, we had previously mentioned that second bullet point that we were really waiting on an equity study. We are currently in the evaluation committee stage for the equity study, where we would then utilize an equity approach to identifying where not just dog parks, but other amenities that are identified within the Parks and Recreation Master Plan's level of service recommendations, which has identified additional park and recreation facility elements that would get added to our system over the next 10 years. We have multiple dog parks that are recommended as part of that process. But we believe that there's an opportunity following the Kiwanis Park Management Plan that wouldn't go against any equity study recommendations to look at adding or at least identifying a dog park within our current design process. We're looking at some preliminary design for the 17-acre North Activity Zone at Kiwanis Park. It's the area on the right-hand side that is marked in red. It is a 17-acre area that currently includes the cloud splash playground, a covered playground, an uncovered playground, and a restroom facility. The 2 playgrounds and the restroom facility are scheduled for asset management replacement. And we believe that this is a great time to look at that full footprint and identify if there's an opportunity or where within that footprint a dog park would actually fit best. So that is an area that we're looking at. We have just entered into contract with a local design firm that was on our own call list. And we'd anticipate that we're going to start scoping that and then reaching out to the public here in the next few months to have that process work through. And then we have construction that will be identified not in fiscal year 22-23, but 23-24 is when we anticipate having some funds for that. Understanding the preliminary design will move into design. So it's still a few years out, but something that we're entering into, adding a dog park at Kiwanis. It is one of 2 regional parks that we have, the other one being the Tempe Town Lake. The rest would be neighborhood and community parks, and we believe the equity study is really going to help us identify those areas of town that would make the most sense for us to add from an equity perspective.
Craig, can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
So tell me again when the Parks and Recreation Master Plan should be complete?
Yeah, the equity study, which is a kind of a concurrent, well, it's something that is right after the master plan is completed, which it has been completed, the master plan. The equity study, we went out for a formal RFP, and our team is currently evaluating those responses, and they'll likely come back to Mayor and Council in the next coming months for a contract recommendation for approval. And then we anticipate that being about a year-long process that will help inform not specific placements, but these are areas of town where these elements should be looked at making investments based on where they're most necessary at that point.
So the Kiwanis Park is a little bit more long-term than, if I'm understanding this correctly, for a dog park. And then the other ones, after the equity study's done, could happen a lot sooner than that, correct?
We would anticipate Kiwanis Park would happen sooner because we can start the design phase now for that piece. Based on how comprehensive the design would be, it's going to be an 18-month or so design process. And then it would lead to construction. I would anticipate that would be implemented and constructed before the equity study recommendations, though we could certainly follow that equity study recommendations up shortly after that by identifying the best locations and then start working with neighborhoods to implement some improvements.
And another question is, you said that there were multiple dog parks that you were looking at, multiple areas. Can you expand on that?
We have within the Parks and Rec Master Plan, I believe, 4 dog parks that we'll be adding this decade in the 2020s. We haven't, within the master plan, there has not been any mention of where those should be located. This could be one of them here at the north side of Kiwanis Park. So we would have 3 other ones that could be added.
And can you tell me, like, the last 4 years, how many dog parks we've added?
We added Clark Park back, I think, in 2017, 2018. And then the previous one to that, to my knowledge, would be the Tempe Sports Complex.
Okay, so the dog parks have been on my radar for a long time now. So I guess I'm concerned that we haven't had more. Because I get so much feedback from the constituents about them wanting dog parks. So I guess we can circle back and discuss that a little bit more later on, but it is a concern of mine just because of the feedback I get. So, but Greg, thanks so much for the update. Councilmember Cubey, did you have anything else for Greg?
Yeah, I know he's going to update us about other stuff related to dog parks, but in terms of additional, I do have 2 questions. And
okay.
Kiwanis, so that borders on the lake, does it not, Craig?
It does. The very south side of that activity zone does border that sidewalk, only because there's a concession stand and restroom that we're looking at, including within those that activity zone. There seem to be some natural potential areas kind of closer to Baseline Road in that top left area. That's a big turf area that's currently not utilized. That could be a good fit for that, but certainly we want to be cognizant of any traffic and parking needs as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, the reason I bring it up is because I've heard from constituents about interest in having a water feature for dogs in Tempe. And I'm wondering if there's, I mean, obviously they can't use the splash park with the kids, but is there a possibility of having some kind of water feature, or even with a lake? I don't know if it's possible for health reasons or what, or whether the water is too deep there. I'm not sure if it's even possible, but and you're going to have an exhaustive public engagement on this, so it may develop up on its own. But I just would ask to consider a water feature for dogs at Kiwanis.
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion. I wouldn't anticipate the lake is a possibility, but
Yeah.
there wouldn't be a reason why we couldn't explore that potential elsewhere over there, depending on what facilities would be required for that or what input would look like.
Okay. And the other thing is, it's about Daly Park. So, you know, the Tempe Elementary School District very nicely put in some gates in an already developed retention basin. And then there was one community member that was opposed to it, even though it's used as a de facto dog park, small dog park for small dogs. Are you familiar with this? And
Over by Broadmoor? Yep.
yeah, it's closed now to dogs, right? Technically, it's still used as a dog park. But it'd be good to kind of explore that issue and then have a public engagement process and talk about it. I think the reason why the community member is objecting is that he was finding a lot of bags of dog waste in his alley, maybe because there's no place to put the dog waste in the little retention basin. I don't know, but just bringing that up as an area, because it's already, you know, primed. It has a gate now, so it's ready to go, but it may just need services and an agreement between the city and the schools to have it be a real dog park, but there wouldn't be much cost because it's already done. You know, the gates are already put in. So I just wanted to, you know, mention that. And then the last thing is that Daly Park, I know there are fences in areas where, and this, I mean, I realize that equity study is going to determine where the other one should go. But at Daly Park, there's a lot of fencing because of the ball fields that could be used as part of the fencing for a dog park. So it kind of you could double down on that. Kill two birds with one stone, kill two dogs with one stone. No, that doesn't sound good. But there's an opportunity to look at Daly Park because there already is fencing that wouldn't need to have 4 sides of fencing. It might just need 2 sides of fencing. And it's, you know, it's near the railroad tracks. It's not going to bother people and be noisy to residents because it's on the north side of Daly Park. Are you familiar with that configuration of fencing in Daly Park?
I am. Yeah, it's on would be the kind of northeastern portion of the park.
Yeah.
Yep.
So has that been looked at as a possible location in Daly Park?
It hasn't, in the sense that we haven't identified Daly Park where we would site something within Daly. It would be a consideration if Daly Park is an area that we should consider adding. We would have to think through access. Fencing is absolutely something we'd need to consider. And if something is already fenced, it would certainly keep costs down potentially. So
you have to balance, like you want to focus on the equity lens, right? And that tells you one thing. And then you have opportunities that are there because they're cheaper, and that might help to supplement it. I know it's a careful and delicate balance, so I appreciate you looking at all those aspects of it. And thank you so much. And now on to the rest of the presentation.
Yes, and Craig, maybe you could come back next month and give us an update on the Daly Park and what Councilmember QB's suggestions are, just to circle back and see if we made any progress with it. Would that be okay?
I could
Maybe just a quick update.
Yeah, the quick
Retention
update.
basin. Yeah.
So my only question would be is, am I looking at the potential for Daly Park as a dog park, knowing that the equity study hasn't occurred? Or
Yeah, I mean, the equity study is going to take years, it sounds like. So, or 1 year or whatever. I guess I would like to, we can always change it if the equity study comes back and says, oh, we should not have a dog park at Daly Park, then we could, you know, we could make adjustments. But I think to wait on that study that long is, when we've got some fencing there, I think we should try to move forward with it. At least look into it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe we can do it because we'd have to bring it back to council. But since retention basin park it's already there, it's a matter of, having to have probably public engagement and seeing what the possibility is. And you might come back and say, it's just not going to work. We can't really support that. But the TD3 was kind enough to expend funds to make it a small dog park. It's just sad that it's not functional in that way. People just still put their dogs over the fence though, see it all the time.
so to clarify, we are talking Daly Park, not Broadmoor School, correct?
I'm sorry, I was talking about, well, Daly Park is a consideration, but I realize it's going to come under that, maybe the equity study has to be considered with it. So, I mean, Councilmember Adams, unless you really want to move on Daly Park, they're very close to one another. So it seems like as a stopgap measure, looking at this retention basin and its possibility to make it a formal dog park might be something we could look at in the meantime before the equity is done.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds good. So that would be what we want Craig to report back on.
Yeah, maybe just, report back on the retention basin park that's already there that isn't really being formally used, because there was one community member that objected. Maybe there's ways to answer that community member's concerns so that he doesn't get waste dropped off in his alleyway.
Mm-hmm. Was there a container in that area for people to?
I'm
'Cause
not
if there's not
sure.
a container, we have to have a container to.
Yeah,
so
I'm
people
not sure there was.
Okay. Okay. Well, Craig, if you could do that next month and just come back and see what you found out, that would be great, because at least we'd get another one going.
Thank you.
You bet. I appreciate it. So very good. Okay. Any other questions, Councilmember QB, on this?
No, not on that. Now we're gone to seasonal turf repairs.
Okay. Okay. So moving on to item 4B3, solar ready code update. Shelley.
Oh wait, I don't think he finished.
Well,
There was
you did it.
seasonal turf repairs.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Sorry, Craig.
I was just going to make a quick announcement that we are entering into our seasonal summer turf repairs. The dog parks typically are used most when the turf grass is not actively growing. So we've got some scheduled projects. May at Mitchell Dog Park, as you can see on the right-hand side, some work that we worked through last year. Papago in June. There are 2 halves to the dog park, and then we'll make some improvements at June over at Creamery. And then Tempe Sports Complex, we went through a significant renovation over there last summer. We will anticipate making some limited in scale seasonal repairs this summer, likely just a few weeks for each side of that kind of split dog park down at the Tempe Sports Complex. But I was just gonna announce almost like a construction project coming up on a very limited scale that we'll be going through what ends up being some annual seasonal turf repairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I cut you off. I got so excited about the other dog parks. I got carried away. So anyway, I apologize. Okay, anything else? Did you have anything else, Craig?
No, thank you very much, council members.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is 4A, current items and updates. And we'll begin with item 4A1, integrate. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page. We already did all that. It's been one of those days. I've had too many meetings today. Okay. Now we're going to move on to item 4B3, solar ready code update. Shelley Seiler, take it away.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams and QB. Breanne Fisher is actually going to be helping me with this presentation. And so it looks like she's pulling that up. Or is that Kristen?
Hey, Shelley, it's Breanne. I've got it pulled up.
Perfect.
Okay, Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Kuby, thanks for having us. So we've been in front of you before with Solar Ready Code updates, and we wanted to be able to provide you the latest information. And with that, as this relates to our performance measures, sustainable growth and development, 4.18, reducing community greenhouse gas emissions by 80% of 2015 levels by 2050 and achieve community carbon neutrality by 2060. I want to point out where this lives at and is directed our work by through the Climate Action Plan, and specifically the Climate Action Plan update. We have the 3 highlight actions, and the green codes and standards is really where this work lives and comes out of. Within the green codes and standards, specifically, we're talking about a suite of codes that we are working towards making some changes on. Though that suite of codes includes Solar Ready Code, EV Ready Code, City Buildings International Green Construction Code, and then a fully external voluntary adoption of the International Green Construction Code.
All right. So just a reminder of what is involved in being solar ready. Most of you have probably seen this slide in previous presentations. So it's applicable to all new construction, which includes multifamily of 4 and 5 stories. And it creates a solar ready zone on buildings that are 5 or less stories, but for residential or multifamily, it actually only as written applies to 4 and 5 stories. So the solar ready zone is supposed to be 40% of the calculated roof area, but it actually removes any vegetated roofs, skylights, and occupied roofs. And then in order to account for any increase in structural load, when the calculations are done, the engineer just adds that 5 pounds per square foot. And then we just want to make sure that their interconnection pathways are available for future piping, and that the electrical service has reserved space for connecting the solar ready area. So moving on, thanks, Brianne. So what we did also was we looked at where in the region and who was adopting solar ready codes. So Scottsdale has adopted the 2015 International Residential Code. That's Appendix U. We also know that they're working on adopting the 2021 IECC, which does include solar as a component of it. Tucson has also adopted solar ready codes related to residential, and they did that through Appendix T. And then finally, Pima County also did the same thing as Tucson, where they adopted it through Appendix T of the 2018 IRC. So a little bit about the process that we did go through. In February, we had a stakeholder meeting with those who are closest to the idea of creating solar ready zones. And then we had a virtual public meeting on February 15th, followed by a second stakeholder meeting in February. And then we went to the Sustainability and Resilience Commission in March. We didn't come to you in March for that SLC update, but we're here today for that follow-up update. And then we also provided the opportunity for anyone to comment via our Tempe Public Forum, and that was open from February 15th to March 1st. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Brianne.
So given
Sorry.
Oh, sure.
Chair Adams, can I say something? Well, can we go back to that, Chair Adams? Is it okay that I'm speaking?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was on
The
mute.
public outreach, like, what did the Sustainability and Resilience Commission say? I mean, we've heard from the Multifamily Housing Association and you know their opposition expressed, but what was the what did our Sustainability and Resilience Commission say or advise?
Yeah, so they did support moving forward with the Solar Ready Code during their March 14th meeting.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions before we go on?
That's good, thanks.
Okay, you bet. All right, go ahead. I guess it's back to Shelley.
So this is Brianne. So given the public outreach that we conducted, we did find that it was going to be a better approach to continue to do some public outreach with our stakeholders on Solar Ready. As I mentioned earlier, the City of Tempe is working on a family of code adoptions and engaging with the stakeholders on a regular basis throughout the duration of those several families of codes that I mentioned earlier. And given that, we are coming to you all with an advised, updated schedule and a little bit of a pivot to work with the stakeholders on the EV ready code right away, as opposed to the solar ready code. In the public engagement process, we found that there is more of a market demand for EV ready. And given that is one of the codes we want to adopt, we figured we'd start with the lower hanging fruit. We also are interested in working with Shelley's department in planning throughout the general plan update process and having some more in-depth conversations with our development stakeholders about what other kind of low-hanging fruit challenges, obstacles, opportunities there are to partner on mutual goals when it comes to code adoptions. So as you see on this slide, the current schedule is laid out, and then the new plan is laid out on the right-hand side. So still hitting all of those codes, however, just kind of swapping first and foremost with the EV ready code, given there is natural interest and market demands. That is what we're proposing is going forward, given the stakeholder public feedback that we've received. And I think that wraps it up, but if there's any questions, me or Shelley would be happy to answer them.
And Brianne and Councilmember Kuby and Adams, I'll just add that we have started that research on the EV ready code, and we've identified some local municipalities as well as areas across the nation that have adopted the EV ready code. It's kind of done in 2 different areas, but I just wanted to assure you that we are moving forward with that EV ready code and research.
Shelley, can you tell us what communities around the valley have adopted this?
The EV ready?
Yes.
So there are actually quite a few communities, but Sedona has adopted it as part of their 2018 IECC. They adopted it as Appendix CB. I also looked at Denver, who adopted it, but they contained it in the main portion of the 2018 IECC as an additional section. And I think one of the things that just needs to be considered as we move forward is, there's 3 components: EV ready, EV capable, EV installed. And so what percentages we would like to see. And so that will certainly be part of our research and outreach to stakeholders to look at those different options.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize. I apologize for turning off my camera. I'm having connection issues.
No problem. I'll be glad when we're done with this virtual business. It's much easier to do them in person, that's for sure. Anyway, council member or Brianne, did you want to say something?
Nope, that is all I have. But if there's any questions, happy to get them addressed.
Okay, Councilmember Kuby, do you have any questions?
Yeah, and we've had some internal discussions about this, and Shelley and Brianne and Braden and the whole team so appreciate all the work that you guys have done in community development and the Office of Sustainability and Resilience. I have to express disappointment only because I want to see us lead in this area, and safe to say we're not leading. We can't always be the first in the state, right? And I know that Scottsdale, Tucson, and Pima are doing so much with green building, and they're kind of way ahead of us. And 2015, Scottsdale 2015, and we're 2022 with the International Green Code. But I get it. And EV code, though, my concern is I want to see us be ready because the marketplace has adjusted, right? We see that within this decade, there are not going to be any fossil fuel cars produced. I mean, Ford is making major commitments. They're coming out with their first pickup truck that's all electric. So we're seeing this transformation in the automobile industry And so we need to be ready for that. We're ready for infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure funds that come in for EV readiness, and be ready for opportunities should there be any climate change legislation that comes out of the dysfunctional Congress, U.S. Congress. You know, we need to be ready and on the ground. I know that even ASU and there's other groups applying for funding to be one of the centers in the United States on EV readiness. I know that I've spoken to developers, I've spoken and land use attorneys. Think about Wendy Riddell and Ben Groff, who are prominently before us, and they say, yeah, solar ready code, EV code, like we're there. We know with new builds, we got to be ready. It's the demand that's coming from our clients, and from there, renters and tenants want to see this. So, I know that there's sort of this we have to distinguish between new builds and older builds. For the new builds, not to have the EV ready code ready, they're going to have to spend a lot more money to make it EV ready, right? So it's in their interest while they're building to do it now. And so I'm wondering if things can be sped along for the EV. I guess what this is all coming to, I'm wondering if we could speed along, if this makes sense, Shelley, if this makes sense, Brianne, new builds versus, older builds and adapting. Can we adjust the timing? Like, can we get the EV ready code for new buildings done before the other EV code? Are we distinguishing between new builds and old builds and renovating?
I would say that, this is Shelley, I think that there does have to be a distinction. In my research, and I don't want to get into this too much because I don't want to, EV ready wasn't specifically agendized, and I'm happy to come back even next month if you guys want to. But from what I'm seeing in other communities, it's for new construction. Or sometimes if there is enough of a change and in the construction, say valuation or limits of the construction, then it can apply. But again, most of my research has found that it applies to new construction.
Well, that's good to know, because I was speaking at the Sustainability Forum with a number of business representatives, and I won't mention the person who mentioned this to me because I didn't get her permission, but she said there's no problem with new construction and doing EV stuff. It's what's multifamily housing association, housing developers are more concerned about what's out there presently, So there's already developers who are doing this. I just would hope that we would do a little sooner than December, because between now and December, we may have a lot of projects that are built, right? We can negotiate those individually because there are groups, Ben Groff is doing EV ready, Carvana is doing EV ready. So, I just want to see things move more smoothly and more quickly. I understand that we have to delay it, but I also want to urge us to focus on the true stakeholders, which are our residents. And, we are in a climate crisis and we need to respond effectively. And we can't let, sort of corporate special interests kind of jump in and try and, push us away from what our true goal is, which is rapid decarbonization of our community. So, I salute you for all the work you're doing. I'll be leaving council soon. I just hope that we can move this quicker, because there's such economic opportunity that's out there, both with federal funding, with county funding, and frankly, utility funding. Utilities are very interested in electrification. It helps their business model. So I think we have a confluence of interest there, and we shouldn't be pushed off target by interests that are not necessarily looking towards the larger public good. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kuby, Shelley or Brianne, do you have any other comments?
I think I don't have anything else to add, and we will certainly move this along as quickly as we can. There's definitely some decision points as part of the EV ready code, but we will be bringing those back to this committee and obviously to the full council as well.
When are you planning on bringing those back, Shelley?
We have not mapped out a timeline, but again, we can come back to you all as we identify that timeline. I want to work with obviously Brianne and Braden and the rest of community development. It's over the summer I will be transitioning back to my other role, and I just want to make sure that I've started to transition this and my research to them, but I just don't, I want to make sure everybody's on board. And I know Donna is familiar with the research that has been conducted so far.
Okay. So are you thinking you maybe should come back next month, or you need more time than that? I'm just trying to be mindful of Councilmember QB's time frame.
Certainly. Brianne, what do you think about putting together a schedule? I'm trying to see if I can locate the date of the next meeting here.
Let's see.
Well, there was that slide showed an overall schedule, right? It just didn't show a specific meeting date.
The next meeting date will be May 25th at 3 p.m.
This is Brianne. I think that the best approach is to lay out a more detailed schedule for EV Ready and provide it to Kristen, who can then provide it to the both of you. And from there, we can determine the best time to give a thorough update. I think that it would be best to come to you when we are at decision points, but we might need to map out that schedule and then provide that schedule to Kristen to determine whether that's going to be May or not.
Okay, that's fine with me. I'm just throwing it out there. So,
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember QB, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just reiterating that there's going to be federal funding that comes through. And, my husband he focuses on location optimization and where best to locate electric and alt fuel infrastructure. And there are a lot of federal opportunities coming along. And I would just love the city of Tempe, when I'm, retired from the city council, to be able to capture some of that federal funding coming through, because they're going to look for best practice examples, and they're going to look for cities that already have a history of dealing with it. So they're likely now to go with, with other cities and not necessarily Tempe. And I want us to be in the mix.
Yeah, and Councilmember Kubi, I'm going to hit on some of that work that we're doing at that level in the next presentation.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We'll now move on to 4B4 Regional Resilience Update. I believe we have our Climate Action Manager, Brianne Fisher, to talk about it. In fact, I'm sure of it. So Brianne, take it away.
Okay, let me get this pulled up nice and ready. All right, so this is our Regional Resilience Update. Thank you for allowing me to come and provide you all an update. As we all know, in our climate action plan, in the first one that was approved by council, we look at both how to reduce community and municipal greenhouse gas emissions, and the other component of that is addressing extreme heat. In the climate action plan update, in the highlight actions, we have resilient energy hubs and resilience hubs as kind of our main action we're focusing on as the city of Tempe to address extreme heat. However, we all know that extreme heat and mitigating the impacts of that to our community has no jurisdictional boundaries. Extreme heat is a regional issue and also needs to be a regional solution. And so what, as the city of Tempe, are we doing to work with our cities, work with our partners in the nonprofit sector, the private sector, to address extreme heat? So that's a little bit of what I'll be talking to you about today. We've established a regional resilience infrastructure exchange. It's a grant workshop series that acts a little bit as a grant incubator. So we're gathering our municipal partners and, to Councilmember Kubi's point, taking a look at the federal funding that's coming in and determining what as a region is our priorities in terms of infrastructure that will help mitigate the negative impacts of extreme heat. How do we as a region become more resilient to these negative impacts that are coming our way? So just a little bit of an overview of what the infrastructure exchange is. As I mentioned, the opportunity is these competitive grant programs and being able to scale some of the work, the great work that's happening at the municipal level to a regional level. Local governments and their partners will need to work together to develop plans and projects. We are seeing that at the federal level that is going to be a requirement for successful grant applications, is to have multi-city approaches. They are not looking for one single applicant. Local governments will also need to work with the state and federal government to apply for grants and access funding. We know that the federal funding sometimes will trickle through the different levels of government. And again, as a regional collaboration, we need to work with all different levels, including city, tribes, Maricopa Association of Governments. We have all been part of these conversations, and this infrastructure exchange is really taking a look at how we move from talking about it into action with some solid grant proposals. Just to mention some of the key partners that have been largely at the table, we have the City of Phoenix working hand in hand with us. Obviously, as the capital city of Arizona, they get a lot of attention at the federal level. They're doing a lot of great work, but we want to make sure that the City of Phoenix is not just putting in grant proposals on their own, and sharing their knowledge and their capacity for other communities. That's really what the federal funding is looking for. Organizations like Arizona Forward and Local First, we know that this work needs to engage the private sector and our business community, and their support will be hugely beneficial to the success of any grant proposals that we put forward. Maricopa County has been at the table, especially in the EV conversation. ASU, the Sustainable Cities Network, is a great resource for us to capitalize on the collaboration that currently exists. And we're also working with our community-based organizations like Unlimited Potential and CHISPA. And just to give a high-level overview, as Councilmember Kuby said, there's so many monies coming down from the federal government, but what the group in the grant workshops have been looking at are three specific funding buckets. Healthy streets being one of them, and you can see the associated monies that is coming down from this funding bucket that is accessible to communities across the nation. And so a healthy streets, what they're looking to fund is things that mitigate the heat island effects, innovations like cool pavement, projects that address air quality, projects that scale stormwater infrastructure. We also are looking at the ecosystem restoration funding bucket, which has a $2.1 billion funding bucket for it. These projects are looking at brownfields, water and drought resilience. We had Rio Reimagined come to us and give us a overview of what kind of projects they're working on that could possibly be scaled at a regional level. And then, of course, electric vehicles. There's so much energy and excitement around EVs. This is definitely a grant proposal that we will need to be putting forward. And as you can see, a ton of money coming our way for that. And really, I think the priorities within electric vehicles is in a regional deployment plan, having that regional planning process is going to be a key component of a successful implementation. And also a power grid resilience concern. Our utility companies are definitely at the table in this conversation, but have a concern on the amount of electricity that is going to be put on the grid. And what does that mean in terms of backup storage, solar generated chargers? What is the resilience aspect if there was to be a power outage? How do we maintain life as normal in 2030 with EVs everywhere? And so the three spheres you see on the side is just a little bit of how we've established what funding priorities we're looking at. We wanted to make sure there was existing regional collaboration in these spaces, finding a funding program that has a good fit, and then asking ourselves, and this is really where the grant workshop is coming into place, is there ability to scale this? Is there an ability to scale the workforce element, the equity element, and can it reach the regional level? One thing I wanted to highlight was our partnership with all of this with Unlimited Potential. You guys have heard of Unlimited Potential before. They helped us greatly with our climate action plan update. And as you see, I have a nod to Justice 40, which is President Biden's commitment that for an equitable recovery, facing challenges created with infrastructure, natural disaster, the social safety net, Justice 40 really addresses the inequalities that hinder a sustainable and just society. So it's his initiative for environmental justice. And we're seeing these elements in the federal funding requirements. So successful grant proposals will certainly need to have that strong equity lens and true partnerships with community-based organizations. And Unlimited Potential is going to help us with that. I think the city, Dr. Braden Kay has done an incredible job in incorporating this practice as a norm, as we've seen in the Climate Action Plan update. However, not all of the municipalities across the region are as advanced as us in this space. And so we've partnered with Unlimited Potential, phase 1, as you see on the slide, to develop some guiding principles with the help of other community-based organizations that are from the West Valley, the East Valley, all across the region. Those guiding principles will then be put into play in phase 2. We'll be having Unlimited Potential help identify some mini grant projects, again, throughout the region, maybe an Avondale project, maybe a Mesa project, a partnership between a government entity and a community-based organization. And the goal of these mini grants is to test out the drafted guiding principles and have a natural editing feedback process. Once the mini grant project is completed, what were the lessons learned and how do we incorporate that back into the guiding principles? Those guiding principles will then inform how we partner with community-based organizations for the larger grant proposals. And then just some next steps. We'll be completing our spring workshop series. The goal is to have at least 2 grant proposals. I believe that EVs is definitely going to be one. The other one is still kind of taking some shape. And then in the fall, we're going to continue this workshop series and be incorporating our Cool Kids work. As you both know, Cool Kids, Cool Places, Cool Futures. We have set up youth councils in our school districts, and we have youth really being engaged for the first time on what they think resilience to extreme heat is and looks like in the future. And so our fall workshop series will be incorporating their feedback and their thoughts, which is a really, really neat innovation that not many other cities or regions or states are doing. And throughout all of this, we're having really wonderful professors at ASU help with that partnership and developing that workshop series. And then my last slide is just to kind of hit home on the need for this work. As I mentioned earlier, we all know resilience to extreme heat is something that is in our climate action plan, but it's not just a Tempe thing. It's a social justice issue and it's an economic issue. You see the graph on the right-hand side, which is just a brief analysis of the cost of inaction. So it's got 5 indicators listed out there, and then the total costs of potential potentially no mitigation efforts going forward could possibly cost $2.3 billion in 2050. And so these are, the indicators are things that we could calculate a cost for. This isn't even including quality of life, tourism, economic development. So the cost of inaction is real, and it's a point that we need to continue to make. And I think a point that we would like you both as chairs of this council committee to continue to make going forward. With that, I can answer any questions that you all have about this work.
Excellent presentation. Really appreciate it. Councilmember Cubie, do you want to ask any questions?
Just some comments, Brian. Thanks so much. And I think you were at that same heat workshop earlier this week, and I see that chart that you posted, which was so startling about the cost of inaction. It's really about investing for the future, and it all pays back and then some. So since negative costs if we don't do anything. So thanks for having the latest and greatest slides. I think that was from Arizona Department of Health Services, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for that. And also thank you for bringing up the equity issue related to electrification. I know, David, you're on the call, David Sokolowski, and you so eloquently speak about this issue that we rushed electrification, and don't get me wrong, I'm supportive of that and want to see that, but I also realize there is a deep equity issue involved because a lot of people can't afford to buy an electric car, even with rebates that are out there. It can still, there are people that will just not own cars and choose not to own cars because they want to live a more sustainable lifestyle. And as we have more stresses on our transportation budget, it's important to consider that when we go full on electric, that we consider first of all, electrifying our fleet, electrifying our transit fleet. And I know Tucson's made a commitment to that. I believe Ansari, who's my colleague in Phoenix, she noticed in this huge item that they're going to be spending like hundreds of millions on CNG fueled buses, and stopped the presses and said, we need to look at this more seriously and really adopt more electric infrastructure and electric buses in our fleet. So we always have to keep in mind, it's not just about electric cars, and we need to have an equity approach there, but it's about electrifying our transit fleet as well. And I know that there's interest in moving forward within the city, but I think there's also, truth to tell, a little bit of resistance, not from the Office of Sustainability and Resilience, but there's still some resistance because it is more expensive to buy an electric bus, and you actually have to have more buses because of charging, you need to have some spares on hand. So it can be more expensive, but ultimately, more healthful for our community. So I know that it's a push and pull, and it's always a balance. But Brianna, I really appreciate you bringing up the equity aspect. I know that the state of Arizona is looking at funding a center to look at equity and electrification. And there are a number of groups that have applied for that. And that's going to be interesting to see if the state will really take up this issue as well, because it's important consideration. I want to just publicly thank David Sokolowski, who's on our Transportation Commission, for continually bringing up this issue of equity. And David, you see that it's involved, that we do deeply believe that equity has to be applied as a perspective and lens and practice to what we do as we move forward in electrifying our world. Thank you.
Councilmember Cubie, well said, and I completely agree. So it is important, and it's just, we have to do it. It's a matter of life and death, right? It's in the numbers, it's in the facts and figures, and we need to do it. So, and Brianne, this is a great presentation. I really appreciate all your hard work on this and explaining everything so well to us. And with that, the next item on our agenda is 4B, new items for consideration, but we don't have any new items this month. So we'll move on to item 4C, announcements. First, Councilmember Cubie, do you have any items for consideration to be added to the future agendas?
No, I don't, except just that small limited presentation about what that dog park retention basin could be or not be, and what the process would be to kind of formalize that. But I just want to take the opportunity to thank all the people on the call, because when I'm looking at the list, I see, we are a cross-departmental approach when we think about resilience and sustainability. And for the first time, you know, I'm leaving council, but I see this budget. Now, granted, the budget isn't finalized, but I see a budget that's thoroughly invested in sustainability and climate solutions. And I don't know. I mean, we know Dr. Braden Kay is such a great spokesperson and such a great colleague and collaborator. But Brianne, like, you moved in January and boom, we're having the largest investment in our climate change solutions than we ever have. So no, I just want to credit all of you on the call, and because I know that you're the ones that really care and are bringing these initiatives forward. And I'm just proud to see that the city is not just that we're starting to really walk the talk. It's not just about passing climate action plans, but it's actually really investing and prioritizing climate solutions and climate in our decision making. So I want to thank all of you who are attending and others for all the work you've done. It's great to see us moving forward in this area.
Yes, I agree. It used to be that we had the one, just Braden, and that was it. And now we are seeing cross-sectional communication with departments, which that's really good because they're getting out of their silos and working together. So it's great to see. And this entire organization is committed to sustainability. So it's a great thing for us to bring together our many different colleagues. So thanks for everybody that's been on the call. The presentations were awesome today. Really, really appreciate it. And I also, I want to announce that our next scheduled meeting date will be May 25th at 3 p.m. Thank you all for being here. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good
I
job.
wanted to thank the Sustainability Commission because they've been so involved, and so on top of everything. But oh well.
Yes.
We'll thank them in the public meeting that comes next.
Sounds good. All right. Great idea. Yes, we will. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Madams. Bye.
Bye-bye.